Hi there. My name is Christine Smith, and I have been given some words from God that He was wanting to release to the church. And um, some of it is going to seem very normal, and some of it may be a bit foreign. But He wanted me to talk about kingdom order. And so I have to tell you what He has released to me and why I'm even doing it, because this is something that most of the church, they don't always think about kingdom order very much. Um, I know that I've been in the church for a long time and I never really thought much about it. Some people are just designed to think about order, but that is not me. I'm not that way naturally, or in my soul, my mind, will, and emotions. That's not who I am. But God is making me that way. And so He's establishing kingdom order in my life personally, and then also in the ministry that I'm involved with, actually, a few ministries that I'm involved with. But this is something that I've found is very important to Him and also very important for me. That's one of the things that God has told me directly that I need to do. And so I would like to read something that is very brief, but it's what God has given me about kingdom order. I was having an experience in the heavenly realms where I was engaging in the court of kings, and you may or may not know much about the heavenly courts, but I have more teachings on that as well. Um, but when I was doing this, He released something to me, and it was um, this word from Him that was written, and He let me read it in the heavenly realms. And this is what it said. He showed me this ark, kind of almost like a horseshoe looking thing. And He showed me the numbers 3, 7, and 10. And to be honest, I'd heard some other teachings with some kingdom order numbers that were 3, 7, and 12. And so I was not really sure why He told me 10. But now I've started to see that everyone that He's been connecting me with has had these blueprints released from the heavenly realms to them. Sometimes they didn't even know they were blueprints, but basically they were just plans for their ministry, their church, their Freedom Outpost, their apostolic centers, whatever it might be. They're getting these plans from God, and they all have this kingdom order built within them. Some people recognize it and some people don't. Some people get a picture, some people just get a strategy. But it's been really interesting to see that God is bringing people to align with us that have the same vision. And so, anyway, I'm not sure if this is something that is just His ways or just His ways for us in this area, but this is what He's released to me nonetheless. And so He said 3, 7, and 10, and He said, "Open the eyes of the heart of the Joshua generation, establish kingdom order, release healing power of my love on earth." And so, one of the things that I'm supposed to do is establish kingdom order. What I've learned is that this is actually something that all of us are supposed to do. We're supposed to establish kingdom order in our own lives, in our families' lives, and in wherever we're serving, whether it's in a job or in a ministry or whatever, that this needs to be established. And so, one of the things that He was leading me to was 1 Corinthians chapter 14. It talks about how God is not a God of disorder, but of peace, and that He would like everything to be established in an orderly way. Well, I had never really even noticed that stuff before. Probably people who are obsessed with order and noticed that more than me. I probably just didn't want to see it. That's the honest truth. But anyway, now I've really seen how God He's been establishing this kingdom order in my life to where now I see the fruit. I really understand that this is for our benefit, it's for His benefit, and it just makes things flow in a smooth way, in a way that He has established to where we are actually a reflection of heaven on the earth. And so when there's a reflection of heaven on the earth, then things start happening. And what happens is basically He has something to fill with His glory and His ways. And so anyway, it's pretty exciting when this stuff starts happening and we start becoming this reflection of heaven on the earth. Well, his glory just reflects right back up, and it becomes like a mirror, and it's beautiful. Anyway, his ways start getting established, and people start coming to know the Lord, and you just see fruit abundantly start coming forth, and you see the manifestation of things that you prayed for quite a while maybe. And so this is what's been happening with me in my life, as well as the ministries that I've been a part of. And so I wanted to release some of this to you so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. So what especially in our lives, we have these spheres of influence. Usually, maybe some of you have heard of the seven mountains. This is something that we each have on our own. Also, ministries, blueprints, all are established around these mountains. And so these mountains are just spheres of influence. They're places of authority that we have. And so, for me, my personal mountain, I have a personal mountain where I'm seated in my throne next to Jesus and the Father. And this is where I've stepped into authority to govern over my life. Now, Jesus is the King of all kings, okay? So when I'm governing, I'm not governing on making up stuff that I want to happen, calling out for some Lamborghinis or anything like that. But this is something that when you start walking in his ways, it says in the Bible that if we start walking in his ways, he will give us charge of his house and his courts. And so when this happens, he starts giving us more responsibility. And when we take our responsibility, we can sit in our throne and start decreeing and declaring the things that he has released to us, his ways. And so we can start releasing things into the earth. We can also take a look over, this is basically a look from the heavenly realms about what's happening on the earth. So we get to release things from heaven into the earth from here, but we also get to see what's happening. And so for me, I'm always taking a look at where the enemy is trying to come on, if that makes sense. And if I see the enemy starting to attack, then I know, oh, here's the time we need to take control of this situation. Something's awry right there. So I go and take care of that and see if God will reveal why the enemy is attacking so we can get that taken care of. I personally try to do that mostly in the courts of heaven, in the mobile court, the court of accusations. But this is something that I feel is an important thing to do, not only once, but we need to be daily watching over our lives and governing over our lives. And just like in Jesus, when his disciples asked him how to pray, he said, "Give us this day our daily bread." And I know that may seem kind of different. It's talking about the provision we need, right? But there's something about a daily thing. And so when we are daily asking, we're not asking for tomorrow, we're not asking for 10 years down the road, which I'm not saying you can't do that, but we're asking for what we need today. And we are releasing and watching for things that are happening today. And so I'm a big proponent of commanding the morning, just like God was talking to Job about, that we need to take responsibility and command the morning, and we have to release these things every day of our lives and make sure that we are taking control of what the enemy's schemes are, because we can thwart the enemy's schemes every day, but we have to pay attention to that. And so when we establish kingdom order in our lives, he will give us these spheres of influence, these seven mountains, and we can see what they are. So for me, I have a homeschool mountain because I homeschool, and so I'm always looking over that and releasing just a desire for learning and revelation about who my kids are supposed to be. I even I pay attention to what's going on in our homeschool groups from there, and I release things and maybe reconciliation at times through different parents, stuff like that. So these are things that I do there. But then I also have a finance mountain. And so I'm going to be looking over that, and I'm going to be releasing provision there. I'm going to be calling for favor because for me, I work in a business where it's all referrals and stuff like that. And so I'm calling for favor, and I'm calling out the people who really need what I have. And then I'm releasing the revelation of this being for those who need it. And so I just release the provision over my mountain. I do the same thing over my husband. I release favor over him in his job, and just any provision that we need, I release it from heaven into the earth from there. And so I'm always paying attention to what's going on, and if there is some sort of demonic stuff trying to climb up, then I know that it's something that needs to be dealt with. On the other hand, something completely different. In a ministry, for instance, you're going to have benches. Basically, if you think about the courts of heaven, you might be able to compare it to the courts in the natural, but there will be benches where they're basically doing the legislative work and that sort of thing. So you have a bench of three, and when this happens, say you have a ministry, we have an apostolic resource center. And in this ministry, there's a bench of three. This bench of three will go and engage in the heavenly realms together to see what's going on, to get the blueprints from God. And these blueprints are ever being revealed more and more. And so we'll have the basics at the beginning, and then, oh, more is revealed over here, and more is revealed over here, and then more. And so you usually don't have the fullness of these blueprints, especially until you have the bench of three functioning. And so the bench of three, it's more than just a leadership team. A leadership team, most churches, we've functioned with committees or leadership teams or elders, and these are things that are all good. I'm not saying they're not. But for me in the ministries I've been a part of, a lot of times we haven't really sought God about, well, how many people are supposed to be on this team? How many people are supposed to be on this committee? What are we supposed to be doing in the team? We basically just get together and come up with our own grand ideas and commit them to the Lord. That's in the past what a lot of ministry teams have done. Well, this is a little different. We want to not commit our plans to the Lord. We want to see what God has to say about what we're doing and then put that into practice. Because we're not trying to establish something to glorify God, but we're trying to establish something that God is saying He wants to happen on the earth. And so it will glorify Him in the process. But it's a little different than just saying, okay, He said to start something, so we're going to make up a way to do it, and we're going to go with His strategies that He releases. We're going to go with what He wants to happen in our ministries, and then we're going to look for the people who are connected to those things. And so what you might find different is God is strategically moving people around to plant them in these places where they're meant to serve. And they're meant to serve with their special gifts. And a lot of times we try to just fill places and volunteer positions with who is supposed to, like who we have in the ministry. And we just say, oh, maybe you'd be a good greeter. And we just go like that. And this is not how, I really don't believe this is how God wants to establish things. He wants to do it with His kingdom order that has to do with who He has made people to be and what their destiny contains. And so He already has set up the plans for them before the foundation of the earth when He created them. He already has the plans for them, and they may not have an idea what that is, and sometimes they have a full revelation of what it is. But we need to see who connects to the blueprint and where they feel connected, and then we need to make sure that we're feeling that God is connecting them there too. So right now I serve on this bench of three, and what we do is we help establish the blueprint, make sure people are getting plugged into the places they need to plug in. We are always we are praying over finances. We are praying over the right people to align with. We are always praying over the protection of the people and the ministries. We have all these 7 mountains that God has laid out in a blueprint of what we're supposed to focus on. And so, for instance, one of them is actually kingdom order. And so we are focusing on kingdom order. Well, kingdom order for us is helping others establish their blueprints as well. And bring that kingdom order. Well, each one of those 7 mountains One is teaching the word. There are different things that one is worship and intercession. There are different areas of influence that we have that God has laid out in this blueprint. And this bench of seven is made up of everyone who is basically in charge of the mountains, if that makes sense. And so this bench of seven is where you're going to see the fullness of the fivefold ministry come into play. And so the apostle, the prophet, the evangelist, the shepherd, and the teacher, they are all going to be serving on these benches. And when you have everyone working together with Christ as the head, then you start to grow into the full maturity. And he starts to manifest in a way that everyone starts functioning in the fullness. And so it isn't just that you're always going to be prophet all the time. You're going to realize that you're going to start looking more like Jesus. The more we start working together, the more our gifts will rub off on one another, and we'll start really seeing the fullness of Jesus and starting to look like him the more we become one with him. And so that really is the goal, is to have us all working together to be able to see the fullness of Christ. Because when you only have a bunch of evangelists functioning, you're not going to see the fullness. When you only have a bunch of pastors functioning, you're not going to see the fullness, right? And so we also want to get out of the Moses generation. The Moses generation is where, Moses went to God on the mountain and brought the people with him. They got scared and they said, okay, you just go and tell us what we need to know and then we'll do it. And a lot of people in the church have elevated pastors or apostles or whatever to where they just go to get fed and they get the word from them and then they try to put it into practice in their life. And the Joshua generation is a little different. The Joshua generation, if you know the story of Joshua, when they crossed over into the promised land, Joshua said, we're all going to go together. We're not following Moses. We're going to go. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Anyone who wants to serve the Lord, let's go together and we're going to take the land. Okay, so we're stepping into the Joshua generation where we are all going with Christ as the head and not with us. Okay, not with us as a head, not as a pastor as a head, not as an apostle as the head. We're not coming under anyone's covering. We are going only by Jesus, working together as one body, one ecclesia. And so this is what's happening. So this bench of seven will work together. You'll have the pastors, the teachers, the prophets, all these people with different gifts who will be working together to see the blueprint come to pass. And on each one of those mountains, then you'll be able to see, like for instance, the Word Mountain, teaching the Word. You'll have different things that have to do with that. So maybe you'll have those who are called to preaching, and then those who are called to just teaching Bible studies, and there'll be different things that they have in their little blueprint. Okay, so it's all part of the larger blueprint, but it's what they have that they need to establish their 7 areas of influence. And so what they'll have is a bench of 3 on that mountain as well. And so if you think about it, this kingdom order just duplicates and duplicates. And then what we are doing over here, one of the things we're doing is a healing mountain. Okay, this is something that we feel very called to, is bring the healing power of God into the earth. Well, there are other ministries who we are aligning with who are also involved in healing. So we can work together where our blueprints kind of cross over, if you know what I mean. And so here's a blueprint, here's the blueprint, but we both do healing and they just come right together here, and we work together on healing for this. And so then we may work together on intercession on this. And that's kind of how it works. And all blueprints are meant to overlap so the full body of Christ is working together. And it is this this active unity instead of just this passive unity of loving each other, praying with each other, a couple times a year, that we really have this active unity where we're working together. And so you'll be able to see these blueprints overlap, but this kingdom order has to come into play for us to be a reflection of heaven on the earth. And so I really encourage you to seek God on what is it that you need in your own life that you need kingdom order in. And sometimes it's as simple as not even having the numbers. But for me, I was doing a whole lot of mentoring for a while, and I was getting overwhelmed in my life. Just I felt like I was constantly being pulled, and I couldn't focus on my kids and my family, and I couldn't, all these things were just too much, and I wasn't getting rest, and it was too much for me, but it was all stuff that God had called me to do. So I was kind of confused about what to do. Well, He released something to me that was kingdom order for my own life. And He just said, I want you to establish these 2 mentoring groups. And so when you do these mentoring groups, people can all plug in together and you'll be able to mentor everyone, but you'll still have the order in your life to where you won't be overwhelmed. And so, anyway, I did. I didn't even know. I felt like I didn't know who'd even care to be at these groups, but then all of a sudden they started filling up and more people wanted to be a part of them. And it was clearly from God. This is the order that He brings. It's not establishing a schedule on your own. It's just allowing God to speak into what things need to look like. What time should it be, God? Sometimes He'll just say, well, you decide. But we need to be clear that we're seeking His ways for our life and not just creating our ways and dedicating them to Him, if that makes sense. So if you connect with this and you need to seek order, please get in contact with me. You can leave a message on this. You can look me up on Facebook if you'd like. My name is Christine Smith from Wichita, Kansas. And I would love to help you establish kingdom order. We're going to start some mentoring groups for leaders who are trying to get blueprints established in their ministry. But if you just need kingdom order in your own life, I do an Engaging Heaven class that is happening on Wednesdays and Sundays right now. Wednesdays from 6 p.m. Central Standard Time and Sundays at from 2 to 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we're doing where we do a teaching together as a group, and then we also engage in heaven together. And so we'll seek the Father's heart on these things. Some of it will have to do with kingdom order. Some of it will have to do with all sorts of different supernatural things that have to do with the heavenly realms. But we're and we want to partner with you together and not just leave people out on their own. But I just hope that this is a blessing to you. I hope that you clearly hear from God what that kingdom order needs to be in your life and in your ministry, because this is important to seek His face first and not listen to everybody else, but just seek Him first, test everything, and just know that God has some special plans for you to prosper you and to harm you and give you hope and a future. Not to harm you, give you a hope and a future. Anyway, I love you guys. I hope you're having an awesome time in your walk with Jesus, your walk with the Father through the Holy Spirit. We know that He is going to prosper all of you for seeking His face. Anyway, have a great day.